Today's $64 million question is, what is a post-corona world going to look like for Black people? I want you to take a brief peek behind the scenes into the planning room to see what a group of forward-thinking, economically focused people of color are doing to prepare for tomorrow. But I wanted to start today's conversation off by talking about the current event that we're dealing with as it relates to Corona and the developing information that we're getting about the disproportionate impact that this event is having on people of color. And I'm sure you all have heard about it, right? If you haven't seen the Revolt town hall meeting that Diddy did the other night, this is starting to get some attention, and I think that we have an opportunity to maybe give voice to the questions that are emerging right now around this particular challenge, because I think the conventional wisdom that's growing is maybe we're dealing with something other than a virus. I don't want to go out on the, twig of high octane speculation that everyone is standing on relative to the planned bioweapon conspiracy mindset, but this appears to be some type of an unnatural occurrence, and it's disproportionately attacking people that have a phenotype that is disproportionately represented by our community. And as a result of that, I think we should give voice to that to the questions that our community is having. What are your thoughts?
I've got a ask, and I've got a clarify type of question. When they're saying disproportionate, we are already 13% and then 70 some odd percent, and then they're saying the numbers are disproportionate, but they're not giving the count. So the count means something, because disproportionate to 13% equated next to 70%. Yes, it's going to be disproportionate from the start, but you need a count to really calculate what they're really saying, because you can put a spin on a conversation and take it in the wrong direction. Do you get what I'm saying?
So let me chime in. Good morning to you all. First of all, I'm from the St. Louis area, and I had something hit me this morning where it says 12 of the 19 deaths were from St. Louis. So they are reporting that that may be a good subject because of the illnesses that we already are having. So that's why it's hitting us so hard. But yeah, they're calling it out in specific cities.
Yeah, I know they're calling out the number, but the demographic to that number, to just segregate the whole demographic like a census scenario. Mm-hmm.
Hey, David, to that point, and to Soroya's point, I understand what you're looking at. You're trying to gauge from a baseline perspective and look at how those demographic numbers relate to the baseline. And I'll give you an example. In the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, I live in Prince George's County, Maryland. We are a predominantly African-American community. Of the cases in Prince George's County, let's say there are 1,000 cases. Of that number, and let's say we're 60% of the population. Of that 1,000 cases, we have 750 or 75% are African Americans. Of the deaths, we've had, let's say, we can take any number, but let's just say we've had 10 deaths of that number affected. And of that 10 deaths, 7 of those 10 have been African Americans. So I think it's that kind of demographic that we're seeing in predominantly African American communities that is sounding the alarm around this disparity. Now, we also have to understand that based on the CDC, the World Health Organization, the Surgeon General, and other reputable medical bodies that have compiled the data, underlying conditions to those not only infected by, but die from the coronavirus are diabetes, obesity, heart disease, hypertension, all of those things that you traditionally find in our gene pool in the African American community. So that gives it some context.
Yes.
And I think to some extent we've got to look at it through that prism.
So, and is it the lack of assistance that is taking us out, or just the underlying conditions?
It's a combination of those things, because traditionally we've had, poorer access to medical care than any other community. We've had poorer access to good nutrition. We have less insurance than other communities to go seek that medical care. The medical care that we get oftentimes is not up to par or standard. So you have a number of factors impacting that bottom line. And those things have really kind of, in my mind, conspired to create this almost tsunami in our community as to how this virus is impacting us.
And if I could butt in for a second, another thing that is that I was looking at from my perspective is African American communities are also much closer together. Like you have the projects, you have in these large cities, they're right beside each other. So it's easier for the virus to transition from one to another versus in subdivisions that are predominantly white. They have a lot of land in between each person. So the spread is not, it's a little bit more contained. So that also attributes to the numbers that we're seeing.
Yeah, a lot of my family members have lived in, I lived in New York, and I will attest that the setup in terms of urban markets, let's just say Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, we have a lot of Blacks and Latinos that make up not only those communities, but the workforce there. And those are very tight-knit communities. And when you have a service type of job where you're out and about, you get exposed a lot more. And even the commute to work, think about that, tight subways, tight buses, tight rails, we're overexposed. And to some degree, because of the cost of living in centers of major markets, Chicago, Maryland that you talk about, DC, New York, all of these are participating factors as well. A lot of us, when we think about people who are driving buses, a lot of it is, sometimes us, so we're in these tight, confined, markets and areas and jobs. So we're getting exposed at a higher level rate too. So all these contributing factors, man, they're really things to take in consideration as to why it's hitting us extremely hard. I think we need to be bringing this out though, because people aren't talking like this yet. I think the thing with Diddy did help escalate it, and I think it needs to be continued to be talked about. And I do like the fact that, David, you brought up the numbers. I was concerned too, because the same thing, I have read an article of CNN saying African Americans make up 32% of the population of Louisiana, and 70% of the deaths in Louisiana from corona are African American. So what's that number then? And obviously thinking about that's a huge hit when you think about we're 32% of the people, but over 60%, almost 70% of those who are passing away. So it's something we got to really take a look at like what's taking us out. Is it us? Is it the demographics of where we live? It's a host of things. So we got to really put ourselves on the awareness check and really start thinking about how all our setups are. How are we living? A lot of us are fortunate to have our own homes in this, talk right here, but not everybody's living like that. And maybe everybody, some of those people who are passing away, they don't control, where they live and how they sort of are coming in and out of their ecosystems. So maybe that is a contributing factor.
To your point, Kevin, I think that what we have here is an event where Corona is illuminating decades, or should I say the ravages of decades of institutionalized racism. So the outcome of the ethnic community having a phenotype that contains a healthy proportion of the modalities that the Dr. Colbert described a little bit earlier: hypertension, heart disease, all of the kinds of things that are underlying conditions that they're defining as causing a person to be more susceptible to this virus, are directly related to the food deserts, right? Directly related to the institutional focus on providing a certain quality of food, into our neighborhoods, and promoting of, certain behaviors and practices, whether it be, going back to, Ollie North and the Contras, insertion into our community and those kinds of impact. Be all of that as it may, I think that what we have to do is take advantage of the opportunity for providing the economic solution for the "you are here" point. But I think we first have to accurately define the "you are here" point, because at this year zero point, there are a lot of asks that have to be made for different communities to recover from this. And I think that's the narrative, that's the voice that I think we want to take the lead on. We want to capture the narrative that says, okay, we can figure out what this thing was, who was responsible, and all of those other things as we move forward. But from a first things first perspective, we got to stabilize this condition. And just like that, safety warning that you get when you board an airline, we're at a point right now where we need to find that oxygen mask. We need to find that oxygen mask for our community. Because if our community doesn't find that oxygen mask and we don't survive this event, right, we're not going to be able to reach out and help anyone else. And right now we're being disproportionately killed by something that they haven't been able to define. And I think that, and I'm going to take advantage of this Passover season example that we have. There is information that's emerging about potential solutions that we could employ that could be like that lamb's blood that was painted across the mantle of Passover of old. And I think that information needs to get out to our people. One of the individuals that I've been paying a lot of attention to is a guy that's been looking at what could be the potential origin of this. And he's saying that the simple solution to this problem is taking a para-immunity approach. And what that means is taking an approach where you boost your immune system to the point where it has the natural ability to ward off you ever being infected by this disease. And the very simple solution to that is to utilize vitamin C. And there's this other, natural immune enhancing solution called chaga that the people in China that have been able to ward off and recover from this thing have been able to employ. So I've spent a lot of years as a Black man in an ostensibly white arena, dancing with a tutu on, building a stellar reputation. And it's a reputation of confidence. I'm not one to risk that reputation easily, but I think that we're at a point in time where we need to make a call for our people, because if I'm imagining this thing to be the event that it is, I'm seeing this as a situation where someone took a weapon, aimed it at our community, fired, and missed.
Walter, let me chime in on that. When we're talking about, the blood of the Lamb, I just saw that the churches are trying to be exempt from the order of staying at home. So here again, that's, I can't say if that's a predominantly Black or white situation, but there's so many, again, that want to prove their religion by gathering together. I'm saved by the blood. So that in itself is a big deal. And that just came out again, especially with Resurrection weekend here. So those are things that keep us out of sorts too. And to chime in what Kevin said about, our jobs, for some reason, again, Detroit is being hit. And a lot of those are transportation, bus drivers. So industries like, say, where we are predominantly represented is a big deal. It's a big deal. And in that, even hairdressers, they're, doing hair or nail salons, doing it at home, thinking that, oh, it's not going to happen to me, or this is in the comfort of my home, and not realizing that, people that don't live at that residence shouldn't be coming in and out. So it's that kind of disbelief. I think people are still disbelief that, first of all, nothing like this has ever happened at this magnitude. And it won't happen to me. It won't happen to me. So that's the sad thing about all of this. And it happened so fast, there was no education around. It was just like, dive, take cover. So it's huge.
Anyone else have thoughts on this particular area? Because I'm of the opinion that, in addition to maybe kind of delivering some additional information on this particular area that the popular media is not getting out, I think we need to start asking the question: what does a post-corona environment look like for people of color?
There are two things that come to mind. Before this was a factor, we had the definition of 6 degrees of separation. I don't know if many people understand that aspect, but it puts African Americans in a close-knit, you touch one, you touch all situation. And then you have that underlining conditions that if you're saved by the blood of the Lamb, you still might fall dead from the underlining conditions. So your food source has to be upgraded. The project sensibility of stacking us on top of each other has to be eradicated. So there are things that it was going to happen anyway. So now we have to reverse and figure out how to stop the underlining conditions and stop the project that was put upon us, and give us some suburbia.
Well, and the question that I have to that statement, David, is: do we have the wherewithal to accomplish that mission? There's a lot of discussion right now, especially because of this disproportionate impact on the ethnic community, about the idea that, in this situation, Black Lives Matter. But the other side of that question was recently asked by Dr. Frank Anderson, which is, I think, the question that we need to ask to ourselves is: matters to who? Because in this particular circumstance, it's a every man for himself, right? And the dominant population is going to be concerned about itself. So I listened to a White House conference call with all of the Black leaders on this particular issue, and I was expecting them to deliver some, solutions, some comfort to the Black community, and it just turned into a check the box. Let's make sure that you go back and make sure you keep them jigaboos in check, and don't let them get all excited about the fact that this event is disproportionately affecting them. So what I'm suggesting is that during this particular season, it's important for us to use the power of asking, but we got to know what we want to ask for as a community, as a collective.
Land.
I do. Oh.
David, I think you nailed it. I think you absolutely nailed the place where my energy is moving towards. I think that we need a place of our own.
And I do want to pose the question. I know we are asking, is it aimed at the African American community? But the more I think about it, it seems more like it's just aimed in general at the underprivileged community, not necessarily Black or white. We're seeing most of the ones that are affected, whether they're Black, white, Mexican, so forth, they're all in this same boat of they are close-knit together, they have underlying issues. It's as if this was targeted, it looks like it's more for the government trying to get rid of the lower income aspect than just the Black aspect, which we see that we fall under more than any other race or culture. But I'm not sure, just looking at the statistics and what I'm hearing from you all as well, I'm not sure if it's actually aimed at the African American community as much as it's aimed at the underprivileged community as a whole. And then it makes me ask the question of who benefits the most from it. Sorry, go ahead, Walter. No.
And I appreciate that thought process, but at this particular point, that to me is it's almost like, what always happens to our community, right? They come up with something that's supposed to be focused on the Black community, and then we want to bring in the Hispanic community and the LGBT community. And you know what? I'm not concerned about that right now. What I'm concerned about specifically is that disproportionately, it may be affecting these other communities, but it is disproportionately affecting our community. And it's because of the systemic approach that has been employed towards managing us over centuries. And I think that this is a time for us to say enough is enough. And I think that we have the economic position because it's level set. Everything's been crushed down, right? It's a balanced floor for everybody. So as we go through the process of this renaissance, we've got to use the power of asking to get the things that will be optimal in their benefit to what will become our new village, what will become our new epicenter of power, and will put us in a position where we can manage and control the environment such that we don't allow outside pathogens and agents in to affect us in this kind of way. So we don't have a water authority that we don't control like they had in Flint, Michigan, right? I mean, the point that I'm making is that we're at a point now where we can use the power of asking. I think we should take control of that narrative and start that dialogue.
So you caught it. You caught it when you said Flint, Michigan. I was going to try to hold that thought, but how do we stop that can from getting kicked down the road in the same manner?
Let me chime in one more. I'm just a little bit uncomfortable of kind of playing devil's advocate here. I don't want to target it on something that was targeted to us when, again, we are saying and know that it came out of China. My point is, I'll go back to what Walter said about something as simple as a vitamin C or a chug of mushroom. We have grown up on the saying, an apple a day. If we, again, a lot of this is mindset. So I love the fact that we're leading to what we's gonna do, for tomorrow. What are we going to do? Let's not, wallow in our sorrow here. What are we going to do to improve the mindset? Mayors, cities, can you start building bike paths? Can you start putting some infrastructure around this to create, opportunities for us to exercise or just to start having some workshops on how to empower the mind, as simple as an apple a day, a vitamin. Can we get past that? It's big. It's bigger than that. Food is a big deal for families just gathering and celebrating together. And do we have fruit there when we celebrate? So those are things that are bigger than this. I want us to be real in how we are helping to get out of this. So it comes with a mindset, and it comes with success examples. So.
Walter and group, but I'd like to make just a couple of points here. One of which is I want to go back to Walter's original question of what do we do next? Do we as a community have the wherewithal to do anything? And also the power of asking. What do we do next? In my mind is having this opportunity to hit that rewind button, day zero. I think the concept of having our own can extend to a lot of things. I think land is one thing, but I don't think isolation is the necessary answer. And I'm not suggesting that having land is about isolation. It's not about necessarily our Wakanda, but I think our Wakanda has to be integrated wherever we are, if that makes sense. And for me, that means America Cares Act. Here's what we want in that act for our community, because we see the disproportionate impact on our community, and these are the things that we need to address those impacts in our community. That's where I'm going with this.
I think you're heading down a very, very important pathway. And the challenge that I have when I think about that pathway is that it requires a constituency, right? It requires a constituency to get a Congress that, as we know, is not favorable to our community to act in a way that's going to be favorable to us. And my concern there is going back to my blog that I did about Byron Allen, and the importance and the fiduciary responsibility that we have when it is related to our collective civil rights, right, or our collective benefits, right? It's our cookie jar. If we break it, we got to go back and fix it. Like I think Byron is responsible in this situation with what he did with the civil rights legislation. Kevin, do you have a point?
All right. So one of the things I heard, how do we begin to kind of bring this to attention? I just think most people are sleeping around this at all. No, I still think people are not really tuning in to it. So I think we've got to have more conversations, more organized, and there got to be influencers to some degree. But it's also got to be people who are wanting to post some of these conversations. How do we move one or two agenda items forward? My thinking is this, like, when I think about what we're doing, I've not had this conversation with people yet, right? So this is a first. Most people I know during this quarantine, and these are some smart people, they're having social cocktails. They're just wanting to see each other and shoot the stuff. So I don't even know how long it would take to even get our people aware. But I do think it will take some time. And I think there'll be some people who are very skeptical about that. And we understand not everybody's going to be on board. But I do think it's going to take a pretty big effort to get people aware and at least attuned to what's going on first. And then I believe the conversations have to be fruitful, meaning, okay, even our conversation, what do we're having it, what will be one outcome we can build off of as a result of what we talk about here? So as the direction should always be, when we're done here, how do we move the rock a little bit further? And I know that's what you're thinking, that's how you operate, but I'm saying if we're really, since we're very serious about this, how do we get other collective groups to be very serious and we come together? Because I do realize that on the highest levels right now, we don't have anybody who will champion this for us. We don't have the makeup in the House or Senate. I don't see African American champion in my mind. You guys can tell me. I don't see one at all. Maybe Maxine Waters, been there quite a while, and maybe I'm not sure who else. But I'm just trying to think about, as we galvanize here, how do we get collective strength to take the conversation into some level of real ability to act? Or do we do the tortoise and the hare strategy and just do it ourselves, quietly go along, and we produce, and at some point in time, people who are on board will be on board, and those who won't be?
I know here in Indianapolis, I'm part of a community organization, and actually on the 13th, and I can send you guys an invite, Roland Martin will be hosting conversations with our local community leaders here, talking about that. So again, to hit in our backyards, meaning the churches, to pull the ministers and the leaders in our own backyards and to help educate there, because again, that's where the belief system is. Our individuals are going to the churches, and that's where, we've, from days old, we've always had our messaging and our strength in numbers from the church. So that would be how we can, take action within our own community.
But I think that we're at a point, if I could interject something, where, we have an opportunity to take a look at those systems, institutions that didn't work for us in the past, and determine whether or not we're going to rely on those institutions moving forward, right? And so we've got to break, I think, some of our insane relationships, some of our exercises in insanity as we move forward. The one thing that I want us to understand and have a good, strong grip on is our lane and where we are, right? Our lane is the economic empowerment lane, right? And we are in ownership of a secret power, right, that allows us to take a Trojan horse into what is going to be the primary source of revenue for this nation as we go through this recovery process, which is the federal government, and use our secret sauce to take business away, like rich business in any area that we want. Now that's the strategic lane that we own as a result of some legislative actions that have been put in place. But there's also a transactional lane that we own that we have the ability to make more robust, and that is the lane that is associated with the disaster response. And there is a number of actions, which is part of the reason why my scheduling has been so helter-skelter. I mean, while the rest of the country is sequestered and chilling, I'm doing millions. And I mean that in a literal sense, because as fortune would provide, we have a incestuous relationship with the agency that's the federal government's lead response agency on this particular effort, which is the Veterans Administration. And my source is taking opportunities from us and delivering them right into FEMA for delivery into this solution. So we have the ability to be robustly creative in terms of how we look at how we can take advantage of opportunities that are coming from this disaster response lane. And Marquise, I need you to come back, man, because I want you to share with the group the idea or thought that you have that's possible down the mental health lane in this disaster area. Shoot.
I got something to say and I can keep it in. This could be the last, cause it's okay, we never speak again. Y'all know I don't cry, but sometimes I can feel them creeping in. I had my time of war, I think it's time I find my peace within. I got something to say and I can keep it in. This could be the last, cause it's okay, we never speak again. Y'all know I don't cry, but sometimes I can feel them creeping in. I had my time of war, I think it's time I find my peace within. If they ain't hit my line way back when my pockets was thin, now my clock full of dollars, this time is time I got to spend. Time to get off these blocks, that's why I'm going in. I was a dope boy, I'll be a better man. So right now I gotta do what I gotta do for sin. I found out my problem and finally kicked it in the end. I don't know how many times I done shied away from wins, but mama, I promise I never hide my face again. I'm always too guilty to play the victim. You never call, you never truly know a conviction. It's some beautiful souls living some of these women. Sometimes I wish it was more of me I could give them. Pray the Lord I'm forgiven for my dealings if I'm living wrong. Guess I at least can paint the ceilings if I'm a given one. Hard to develop new feelings when feeling numb. I realize I feel like I need them all, cause I'm the one. I got something to say and I can keep it in. This could be the last, cause it's okay, we never speak again. Y'all know I don't cry, but sometimes I can feel them creeping in. I had my time of war, I think it's time I find my peace within. I got something to say and I can keep it in. This could be the last, cause it's okay, we never speak again. Y'all know I don't cry, but sometimes I can feel them creeping in. I had my time of war, I think it's time I find my peace